Greetings iOS Nation. Tonight I am assisting tipbee.com. Welcome to a special edition of their weekly podcast, focused on the iPhone 4S, from news and how-to app and accessory reviews. This is iPhone 4S Live.
iPhone Live is brought to you by Hover. Please visit hover.com/tipbee, that's TIPB, to get 10% off your domain name registrations. It's Sunday, October 16, and since Georgia is traveling tonight and won't be with us, we're interrupting her regularly scheduled iPad Live to talk about the just-released iPhone 4S. That's right, it's a CUDA cast, folks. And joining in the uprising is the co-host of Iterate.tv, the CIO of Nickelfish, Seth Clifford. How you doing, Seth?
I'm doing okay, Renee. Doing just fine.
Okay, just fine. Sir, these are not excited enough adjectives to describe the evening.
I didn't really get a whole lot of sleep last night.
All right,
Yeah.
well...
That's because we were having second dinners at midnight.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to welcome the app editor of Tippy.com and our resident photo mathemagician, Leanna Lofty. How are you, Leanna?
I am doing great, Renee.
Also joining us, our very special guest, the West Coast editor of The Next Web and all-around iPhone guru, Matthew Panzarino.
Yes, hello. How are you?
Sorry, I almost stumbled on your last name there, Matt. I apologize.
That's okay. Wouldn't be the first time.
All right. So, yes, before we get started, Seth and I went to the Singleton conference, or the Singleton Symposium in Montreal over the last 2 days. It was put on by Guy English, Luc Vandal, and a slew of really hardworking members of the Montreal Mac-heads and developer community. They couldn't really get anyone star-studded to attend, so they had to get John Gruber to open it, and Craig Hockenberry, and Daniel Gilcoot, and...
Brent Simmons of NetNewsWire fame did a talk. Dan Morin from Macworld.
Yeah, he took a huge risk, Matt. He assumed that people in the audience would be familiar with a little movie called Star Wars, and then he proceeded to compare and contrast Apple to Star Wars and Steve Jobs to George Lucas. And luckily for him, the people in the audience had seen the film. It was a great talk. And I want to thank them for bringing such a great event to Montreal. And hopefully they will do it again next year. And it finally got me to meet Seth live and in person. And he's real.
Yeah, it was tons of fun. And when Renee picked us up from the airport, I told him that having him right next to me talking into just one side and the sound in the car, it was very strange because I'm used to seeing him in a tiny window.
I'm not just a bust. I have an actual torso, Seth.
And I actually exist, so we proved a lot of stuff this weekend.
Yeah, it was a hell of a week. It started off with what I'm going to call... I don't know, what's a good term? Black Software Release Day, the day the internet cried, the ISP fetal position. Apple released a slew of software. We did a show on it already, but because we have Matt here, I just wanted to kind of do a bit of a recap. It was late at night on Twitter, way too late at night, and all I saw was Matt putting out an ever-increasing number count. And I had a silly suspicion that, like myself, he was working on an iOS 5 review, and the number was I had an almost as ludicrous number as Matt, but he was really racing the line there. Matt, it was a fantastic overview. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to say I really enjoyed yours. I actually looked at yours and was significantly jealous because it was much cleaner and more well laid out than mine was. But
please, yours was so much more concise.
I guess, maybe. But yeah, I kind of just tried to go through and condense, several months worth of using iOS 5 into what I thought the most interesting bits about it were. And as usual, I got caught up in everything that I thought was cool and wanted to get it all in there. And so I was kind of running down to the wire as I saw people's reviews coming out that morning. I just knew I wasn't ready to release it yet. So I waited until iOS 5 actually dropped at a little after 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I totally Mossberged it. I apologize about that.
Yeah, I cursed your name for sure, but no, it was fine.
No, I was just too tired. I had to go to sleep, and I knew there was no way I'd be awake unless someone called me when the thing dropped. I threw in the towel. I called a mulligan. So you go first, Matt. What do you think of iOS 5 now? You've had months to play with it, but only a few days to play with the release version. Is this really the biggest update ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, in terms of raw changes, absolutely the biggest they've ever had. Because iOS 3 was obviously a major shift in, in how they were going to do business, and opened up the developer APIs and everything, which was a tectonic shift in iOS 5 history, so to speak. But this was easily the biggest number of changes. Like, they did an immense amount of work on iOS 5.
It was, Leanna, it was scary, and we actually haven't heard from you about it yet. I know you played around a little bit with the betas, and you got kind of hardcore when the Gold Master came out. Was there a single screen that they didn't add a button or gesture to?
Oh wow, I don't know. They really did go all out, and what I really liked about this update is that it wasn't all about new features. I mean, it had the new notifications, of course, but then everything else was just refinements and just making the iOS 4 better, so that it was nicer. Yeah.
And Seth, you kind of look at this from both a developer and a user point of view. Did you get enough of both?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'd been using it since the very first beta, and so I kind of watched it develop and kind of refine itself into what it ended up being last week. And it's, even though it was really pretty good up front, it's got a lot of stuff that probably we're going to need to dig into, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens with the dot releases that Apple rolls out over the course of the months and the year until the next version of the OS, because there's so much that's new just between the actual on-device system itself, iCloud. I mean, everything, all these balls in the air that they're juggling. So I'm just really curious to see kind of how it all shakes out, and hopefully there'll be some really interesting stuff that gets revealed.
I think Matt and I just winced at the idea of doing more screenshots for a future update. I didn't want to think about it.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Are your thumbs worn out, Matt?
Yeah, I ended up at like 180, and at the time I was doing my review mostly on a snow leopard machine. I wrote it mostly on the iPad, actually, using Elements, but I was doing my screenshotting on a snow leopard machine, so I didn't have PhotoStream, so I couldn't just dump them into iPhoto and grab them, because that's a line only thing. Yeah. But I did a lot of screenshotting. I'm done double clicking for a while.
The thing that impressed me, Matt, was almost like the dichotomy that they managed to achieve, because they did these huge new features like Notification Center and Siri and AirPlay mirroring, which lets you share stuff like never before. But at the same time, all these really granular controls for privacy and for storage. And they even made it more consistent, so you can swipe through more things and move things around with your hands more. It seemed like they're kind of more confident now with iOS.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the level of control that they put into it shows that I think that they're loosening up a little bit on that KISS philosophy they had with the first couple of releases, because the granular privacy controls obviously was a lot of attention was brought to that by the congressional hearings. So they had to make sure whatever it was that they really killed it on this one, which they did, I think. But they added a lot of control over storage. Like, they never would have shown you how much space an app used in the first couple of releases. So giving the user more information and offering more control shows, I think, that they're allowing it to mature. Because they are the only ones that are the gatekeepers for that. So I think they're allowing it to become more of a full-fledged operating system now.
Yeah, Leanna, in fact, they might have bounced you from the App Store if you tried to tell people how much other applications used your storage.
Sorry, I missed it. So I was distracted.
They might have bounced you from the App Store if your app tried to tell people how much storage they were using.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
All right, so let's transition briskly. Oh, the only other thing I wanted to bring up is I thought it was interesting that they still do iOS updates before the new hardware, because Apple is often accused of withholding features, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, so that they sell more hardware. But then a couple days before the new hardware comes out, they give everyone the software, so they don't really encourage you to go out and get the new device if you want the software a week or a month ahead, Seth. Do you think that maybe people are too pessimistic about Apple, or they just don't care about those kind of sales?
I don't know. I think that they know that, well, part of their whole kind of to use a lame phrase, value proposition, is that they're able to bring part of what Apple does so well is they bring new features to older devices. So I think that releasing the software in advance is kind of, I mean, they announce it in advance. So there's not really so much that's a secret. Obviously, Siri was like the big surprise at the show. Not super surprising, but that's the thing that's left. But I don't think they really lose anything by releasing the software first, because it just kind of primes people to get excited and to download it. And a lot of times I think what might happen is that somebody with an iPhone 4 might get the new software, put it on and go, this is great. And then their friend has an iPhone 4S and they're like, this is great, but it's not quite as great as that. And so even if they have what they think they need, they might still be compelled to go out and buy the new device anyway. And then, of course, there's the people who are just totally going to buy the new device no matter what. So I don't think it's hurting them. I think, if anything, it's helping them, because it's just creating excitement around the updates and the platform in general.
But Matt,
Isn't this how they always do it, though? I thought they always release the new software before.
they do,
before
but
the
Apple's
device.
evil. They shouldn't be doing this. They should be withholding this so that we're forced to buy new devices.
Well, the one time that they did do it at the same time, at least, it was a nightmare.
I remember that iOS. But Matt, the internet tells me that Apple is completely treacherous and trying to screw us out of all these new features. How do I reconcile these two realities?
Yeah, I mean, the realities of expectation when it comes to mobile devices is that we get updates for free, right? And that reality was non-existent before Apple started shipping iOS on older iOS or older devices. Because like the Trio, updates to that software were often paid, and they had they had some free updates, but they were like patches.
Yeah.
So if you wanted like big feature updates, you bought a new OS,
Or a new phone.
and or a new phone. Like the OS wasn't updatable at all. So I think that Apple has sort of caused this at the same time as being a victim of it. They caused this expectation. So I don't think that they are all that surprised when people are like, oh, they're withholding stuff, and they ignore the fact that the software update is there, because Apple's done it from the beginning, so they haven't changed. It's just people's expectations have changed. Now free software updates is the baseline. That's zero.
Yeah.
So now people want above and beyond that. So they want every feature to be on older devices, find a way to make it happen. And the accusation will always be there, well, you're withholding it because you want to force an upgrade. But Apple, in fact, does more than most usually ever did, to keep new features on older models.
Tonight's special edition of iPhone 4S Live was brought to you by Hover. Visit hover.com/Tippy, that's /TIPB, to save 10% off your next domain registration. I am really excited to have Hover as a sponsor. It is by far my favorite domain registrar. I use them to register Iterate.tv, ZenandTech.tv, Superfunctional.tv. All of our latest podcast shows were all registered on hover.com just because it's such an enjoyable experience. It's almost like an Apple experience. They don't try to upsell you. They don't make you click through hundreds of screens. You just go in, you choose a domain you want, you check out. It is elegant. It is efficient. If you are thinking about getting a domain for yourself, maybe for a child, for a new business, if you're trying to get an iDomain that one day you can, maybe sell to Apple for $4 million, anything at all, anything that you want to establish a presence for on the internet, just go to Hover. Avoid all of the frustration, the anxiety, the Android crapware approach to domain registrations. Go to Hover and get it done. That's hover.com/Tippy, TIPB, and you can save 10% off your next registration. So getting into the new phone, we have the iPhone 4. No, wait a minute. It's an iPhone 4. Hold on. iPhone 4S. I think that's the iPhone. Hold on a second. I think this is a new. So Apple introduced the iPhone 4S, and the immediate thing is that all of us who wanted an iPhone 5 were horribly, tragically betrayed. It looks identical. What a jip. How could Apple do this to us? This is what I expected. Matt, I know the Next Web put out a story before the announcement that this is what you expected. Was it just the cases? Was it people's dreams? Was it those gigantic Android phones? What made people incredibly not happy with this phone design?
Well, I mean, I think you have to address it in terms of who wasn't happy, right? Because the vocal, not happy people consisted of two main components. You had analysts who are putting out notes to potential stock purchasers, right? To people who are interested in purchasing stock in Apple and want to know, is Apple going to be successful in selling this device, and is their stock going to go up? So should I buy it? And then the second component was people who were in the tech community, tech blogs, who are following the rumors. And so those rumors started with people like 9to5Mac, Mac rumors. We participated, as do a lot of people in the Apple, genre. So those two areas are the places that originated. By and large, like the other 90% of the market is oblivious to this. So they're going to purchase it because it's the new iPhone, not because or not because it doesn't have a new case. So in the end, I think that it's a matter of sound and fury, right? So it's just a matter of you having all of this volume of information shoved at you through this very narrow channel, and all of us follow it, of course. And people that follow the tech field, like people who are going on Twitter and talking to their friends about it and trading articles like, oh, did you see these new cases? And did you see that? Those are the people that are going to get up in arms about it. And in the end, I think that it was a success, which we now see it is definitely a success as far as the initial sales anyway, because most people don't really give a crap. They're just going to go buy it because it's the new phone.
And Leanna, hard candy is out about $50,000 in a bad wager on what the new design would look like.
Yeah. When that was one of the first things I was actually laughing at when the iPhone 4S was announced. I was like, ha, those case makers, that's what they get.
Well, I mean, they score big sometimes, but that seemed to be a big thing that drove people's expectations, is because we saw the case leaks. We figured that's real money for them, and they're not going to bet unless they're pretty certain.
Right, and I think they took that leap because they saw a prototype or something like that. But the thing is there's probably so many prototypes that actually go through Apple's hands that none of us ever see, and then they probably just got a hold of one of those.
Seth, if I ran Apple, I'd be making the craziest prototypes ever and leaking them all over the bars in San Francisco.
Oh,
Banana phone.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Think of how much fun that would be to make people just go bananas over it.
This one's got 3 screens. It's a triangle. I don't understand.
A triangle. This is a sphere. It's a sphere.
The eye waffle.
It's like Sputnik. It's both square and round in places. All right, so we actually got the phone on Friday. Apple stores were going to open at 8 o'clock. The lineups, it was kind of weird because usually there were huge lineups for these events, but Apple did international pre-orders, which they haven't really done before. And there were still huge lineups in the city. I know the Apple flagship store here was around the block and down the alley, but the suburban stores seemed to be quiet. At the one I lined up at, there was about 20 people until 6 a.m. And then there was like 50, and then very quickly 75, and probably about 100 by the time the store actually opened.
I want to hear if you guys are ready for the iPhone 4S. I'm ready! You're ready!
Seth, do you think that because Apple, again, they get accused of creating these big events, of forcing these lineups. This year, they did a lot to prevent them, and they were still there.
Yeah, I especially this year since they used the same body type. I mean, obviously, the manufacturing was a bit easier than it would be with a completely new body. So they probably had the stock on hand. But I think that there's both there's an excitement about going, and I think people like to make it an event regardless of what Apple wants. Obviously, Apple probably loves it because it looks great and they're always all over the news. I think people want to go, some people, and just kind of be a part of it because it's fun. And I think even with the manufacturing advantages that they have, people don't know. So I think they kind of are also feeling a little bit of pressure, like, you know what, I'll just go line up just to be sure. I didn't pre-order. I wasn't sure. I'm just gonna go stand in line for a few hours and hang out and do that, and that's cool and it's fun and all. But I think that on the second year revisions, like we've seen with the 3GS and now the 4S, I think if you just hit that pre-order, I think you're probably going to be okay because they seem to have a pretty good handle on the supply. Have we? I'm a little out of the loop. Obviously, have we heard about sellouts and shortages? I know like the carriers have pushed their ship dates out a couple of weeks.
The white ones still seem to be rare. Like we didn't even get 32 gigabyte white ones here, and they sold out of the white ones much faster than the black ones.
Right.
Leonard,
I think Apple's shipment dates have been pushed out too, haven't they?
Yeah, I think they've been completely sold out, right? At least on pre-ordering.
I think the initial run has been sold out, so they pushed them out like 2 weeks, which is not a big deal for most people, but it's obviously kind of like irritating for somebody who tried to pre-order on the first day and maybe got in late.
And every year, and I'm going to give Leanna the stage here. Every year, the carriers know this is coming. The pre-order people know this is coming. Yet every year, the pre-order system drives people crazy, and the carriers just can't get their act together. Is this just too big an event, Leanna? Is it like a tsunami? No matter how much you hold onto that tree, you're going to get thrown away, or is this something they really should have gotten clear by now?
Well, I want to actually slightly correct you in that it wasn't the carriers who had an issue this time. It was a single carrier, namely AT&T, and I had a nightmare of a day on Friday. Do you want me to go into it?
Sure, but AT&T is the newest iPhone carrier in the US, right? I mean, there's no way they could have known.
Right? You totally think that now that we're on the fifth one that they'd have a handle on it? No, absolutely not. Well, I pre-ordered my phone, and it arrived at my door at about 10 a.m., and I plug it into iTunes, and I immediately am told that it cannot be activated by this time and the server cannot be reached. I was expecting that, but what I wasn't expecting that it was going to take a total of 7 hours before I actually had my phone activated. And how did it? Well, I got my phone an hour before I had to go to work. So I was thinking, okay, I brought my iPhone 4S with me. I did not bring my iPhone 4 because I just wanted my 4S to work. And as I'm helping students, because I'm a teacher and I was holding office hours, I was, kept redoing the trying to activate, wouldn't work. So that was 2 hours. And then I came home and was trying again for another hour. And then I said, this is enough. I'm calling AT&T. I wasn't really expecting them to help me, but I just had to do something. So I called 611, and I was probably on the phone with them for at least an hour. And it turned out that, well, first of all, they blamed Apple, and they said that it was only the AT&T phones that were purchased on Apple.com that were having issues. So they immediately blamed Apple for it, which even if it was Apple's fault, it's not very, I don't know. It's not good to pass blame on somebody else. I was very turned off by that. And it turned out that they actually activated my husband's phone number with my iPhone 4S SIM card. And that, of course, I did not want his number to be working on the iPhone 4S. And then they told me that I was going to have to go and get him a new SIM card for his phone to work because he's using my 3GS, which doesn't use a micro SIM. And then they said, well, actually, in order to get yours going, you're going to have to go get a new SIM card as well, and you're actually not even in the queue to get your phone activated. So we're now at hour 5, and my phone isn't even in line to be getting activated. If I wouldn't have called, nothing would have happened. So she was going to manually enter the SIM info, but then she realized it was on my husband's line, so that was a no-go. So then I had to go to AT&T, and then when I get there, I tell one lady what's going on, and she's like, well, it's not going through, so you're going to have to go to Apple. And I'm like, I'm not going to Apple. And then I said it like that. I said it calm but firm, and I didn't raise my voice. And she flipped out on me and told me that I need to stop yelling at her and yada, 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 and she's going to go get her manager. And I was like, please do. And in the end, the manager was totally awesome. She gave me new SIM cards. She activated both of my phones, and I left with both of my phones working. But, oh my gosh, it was horrible. And then by then it was dark and I couldn't even really use my camera that I was so excited about.
AT&T passing the buck since 2007.
Yeah, I'm totally probably going to Verizon next year. This was the last straw for me.
Seth, I'd like you to know that Nokia has had activation problems since 1802. Apple did not invent this feature.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it was an interesting launch all around. I think a lot of it was handled very well because of the pre-orders, but there's always sort of like a flood of people on Twitter, right, Matt? And you get to see I started my iPhone 4S. I asked Siri a question and it said location services are not available in Canada. And then my next question was, what time is it? And it said, sorry, I cannot tell you the time at 4.74 Boulevard, Brunswick. Wait a minute, you just said it was no look. So
there's a difference between location and directions.
But what was interesting to me is that very soon Siri started to get really slow as more and more people got their iPhones and more people started hammering the Siri server. So now yet again we have another point of potential network congestion to worry about.
Yeah, it's been kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's been working on and off for me as I've been demoing it for people. But I think that no matter how, they probably tested this the same way they do like Apache servers or anything else, where they create requests to the service and then just hammer the service as much as they can to try and test it under load. But that never. Humans are so good at breaking things. So I think that there was no way that Apple could simulate having Siri used by thousands, hundreds of thousands of people within the first week. So I think that it's going to be rocky for the first several weeks.
Is that, Seth, do you think that's one of the reasons why Siri is being called a beta and why it's restricted to iPhone 4S? Because there's all sorts of theories that the iPhone 4 can do it. The iPad 2's got the same chip. Why can't it do it? Maybe it's nuanced licensing. Maybe it's a special part of the A5 variant in this phone. Maybe it's it could be a mystery. Who knows? Could it be just that they didn't think that Siri could handle the load of however million iPhone 4 users jumping on it on the 2 days before the launch?
Yeah. It could definitely be that. No amount of QA that you can ever do at any scale will ever even come close to what actual humans do in the wild. So they could have just put the beta tag on it and kept it on the one phone, knowing that they may have run tests and said, like, what, when everyone on the campus uses it, it gets a little hot. So if everyone in the country's using it, it's going to get really ugly. If we roll this out as part of the software, the entire country is going to grind to a halt. So let's just keep it on this phone. Let's just let this go for now. Let's go for the best experience possible. That could be one scenario. The other scenario, like you said, could be licensing issues. It could just be Apple doing what they do, which is basically saying, we want the performance to be just perfect. So it's only on this hardware because this hardware supports it. Whereas, jailbreakers had video recording on the cameras long before, and then Apple didn't support that going back to, what was it, the 3G, I guess, right? And people still managed to do it, and they enjoyed it, and it was fine. So
15 frames per second of excellence.
Yeah. There's any number of reasons why Siri is both labeled a beta and why it's only on this hardware. My guess would be that Apple suspected that it's going to be a heavy load to carry, and also they figured, let's make this experience as good as possible. And in order to do that, we got to put it on the juiced up hardware.
What I found interesting too is that we get the woman's "I don't care" voice, while your compatriots in England, Matt, they get some dude.
I know. I'm really happy we got a girl because I wouldn't be so excited to have the dude.
I think I've heard stories that they've been, people in England have been flipping it to U.S. English and trying to talk like Hugh Laurie does on House in order to just get the female voice.
I need some pizza.
I reckon. Leanna, have you put Siri through its paces yet? How's it working for you?
It's when it when it can connect to the server, it works pretty good. In fact, after my 7-hour ordeal, the first thing I did when I got in my car was I told Siri, remind me when I get home to drink wine. And as soon as I pulled into my driveway, I got a notification. So I really like it, and I've had fun asking all the dumb questions. But I mean, I also used it this morning to set a timer when I was making my French press coffee. So that's pretty cool.
What's kind of stunned me was the amount of personality they put into Siri, Seth. I found it almost Pixar-like, because it won't make you wait. It'll say, I'm still thinking. And it has a variety of responses. And some of them are, borderline snarky at times. They've really given this like a personality, a character.
Yeah, they've made it very playful, and obviously they've put in a lot of Easter eggs for the nerds like us who are going to try to ask it all of the typical movie questions and try to get the response that we're looking for.
Are you wearing pants?
Yeah. I think that probably what they're trying to do is extend the connection that people have to the device. So, you like your iPhone. It's a sleek and very sexy device. It's the metal and the glass and the angles, and it feels good in the hand and stuff like that. And I think by adding like an extra emotional component and not just deliver a command, perform a command, I think it's going to make people more attached to their devices, and it's going to create an entirely new way of kind of both communicating with them and probably how we interact with one another. Because I mean, half the weekend was you saying stuff to your phone in hushed tones and then going, oh my God, look at this, look, and showing me stuff. So it's definitely a change for how we interact with these devices, even if it is just fooling around and having fun. But I think as people start to discover what this can actually do, like after the initial like, haha, look what we can make it say wears off, and maybe the server load gets balanced and they kind of scale up as they need to serve everybody, I think people are going to start to hit a point where they're like, wow, this really does make things easier. Like I can do these things while I'm driving. It's very safe to do that. I don't have to touch it. I mean, just the accessibility stuff alone that we've talked about in the past, it's really amazing the potential that this thing has as they continue to refine it, because it is a beta, and there's got to be more to come.
Is it sort of like when the original iPhone came out, Matt, when you got the iPhone 2G, and all you wanted to do was show your friends how you could pinch and zoom on photos and swipe through things, and it was just like a little bit of a game. But by iPhone 3G and 3GS, you didn't really care about it anymore. It became transparent. You would just use it. You think the same thing's going to happen with Siri?
Yeah, I mean that's the question, right? I mean, are we going to accept it as like just a base level of quality for using our smartphones? Like, is this what we expect, right? Do we expect it to communicate with it via our voice? And that barrier to voice control has been a long time coming. I mean, or the breaking through the barrier, I should say, because it's been around for a long time. And voice has been the next best emerging technology for 23 years or 25 years. So it's definitely not a light thing. You shouldn't take it lightly. Like a lot of people are like, oh, Siri's just a fad. It's like, who cares? Nobody's going to use it in 10 minutes or whatever. But if it does work, I mean, it's a huge shift, because it's definitely, you're breaking through a barrier that a lot of very, very smart people have tried to. And I think that it does work very much because the iPhone is such a personal device. And I think Seth hit it on the head that it's going to change the way you relate to the device to make it even more personal, because people cannot do without their smartphones. Like, you leave your house without it, you're going back. You're not just going about your day. And people feel very, very personally attached to it already. So if you can give it a live-in personality and make it feel like you're communicating with it on a more personal level, and that it cares about what you want and it tries to please you, not just that it can do things for you or that you can make it do things, but that it is actively attempting to help you. I think that's a big, big hook. And that will, I think, allow people to bridge that gap between I'm going to poke at this or I'm going to speak to it. And I think obviously the technology has to back it up, right? It has to be capable, but I think it is. And I think it's definitely showing itself to be. But that barrier in getting people to accept that That's the key. And if they're able to break through that by using the personality, I think that's definitely a very, very interesting thing. And everybody should keep an eye on it. I don't care if you think it's a gimmick or not. If it's not, you're going to miss this when it happens, whatever it is,
The cool.
Yeah. And you know what else? It's going to go from speaking to your phone to speaking with your phone quicker than people probably think.
The thing that struck me is that when they had voice control in the iPhone 3GS, I'd push the button and just say what I wanted. I never once addressed it. It was just voice control. And people were wondering, like, why did Apple keep the Siri name? Apple doesn't keep names. It was going to be called Assistant, wasn't it? But I call it Siri. Every time I press the button or bring it to my ear, I don't just say to myself, I say, Siri, do this, Siri, do that. It feels like it's something to me, not just this abstract computer program. Leanna, do you think that that's part of what'll change it? Because some people in the chat room are saying it's a fad. No one's going to use it. But people might use it. Do you think that makes it more attractive and have a greater attraction rate going forward?
Oh, sure. I think the fact that it has a name, that it speaks to you, that you say thank you, and it says, I aim to please, the whole conversational, like it's another being almost, has a draw. And I think the chat room is a little bit right in that it is a bigger fad right now than it's going to ultimately be. I mean, everybody's really excited about it. It's all they want to do. All they want to do is use Siri. And that's going to die down because, I mean, oftentimes it is quicker to just tap the phone and then tap my favorites that I'm calling than to tell Siri to make the phone call because then it has the delay. But for other things, it does, even with delay, it does it faster, like setting a timer. I would say it's definitely faster to just ask Siri to do it for me. And I think as it gets better and improves, it's definitely going to not be as much of a fad.
I remember last night after I dropped Seth and the Nickelfishes off at the airport, he texted me, or the hotel, he texted me and just said, good night. If you're driving, don't worry about replying to this. Be safe. And I didn't even think about it. I just hit the dictation button and I said, I have Siri now. I'm offended. I can just talk to you. I don't need to type it. And the message it wasn't exactly what I said. They might have got 3 or 4 characters wrong, enough to make Seth laugh. But you still got the gist of something that I could never have typed out while driving on a highway.
Yeah, totally. And I actually saved a screenshot of it because there were just a couple of words that were off, but they were in such funny places. I have to share it. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I texted you full well knowing that you were in your car, and I thought, geez, I'll talk to you later, but thanks again for everything. And just getting that message back, I had to laugh, and I showed the guys. I was like, this guy already with the Siri in the car and the dictation.
Yeah, Siri didn't like you mocking her. Siri said she's going to open one of the port bay doors when you're around next time.
That's great. When she starts slowing down and singing Daisy real slow, then you got to worry.
We're gonna have to make a new website instead of damn you autocorrect, damn you Siri correct.
Oh yeah, it's almost like R2D2. It's not quite human, but it's so adorable. The thing that struck me though, Matt, and we talked about this on a past show, but I'd love your take on it, is that you have Steve Jobs, who's famous for that calligraphy class, and he brought beautiful typography to computers, and the Aqua interface that's lickable, and the iPhone interface that's just it's beautiful, and almost his final act was pushing this Siri thing out, which could absolutely render far smaller the impact of design and interface and application because it brings on a whole new paradigm of voice.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about Apple and especially Apple under Jobs is that they were really never all that concerned with how things are. They're concerned with how things should be or how they will be. And I think that this is definitely symptomatic of that viewpoint, that if Siri is going to render everything they've done obsolete, so be it. That's their feeling on it, I believe. Or at least it is definitely Jobs' feeling on it, I think, or would have been his feeling on it, rather. It's just a matter of, the interface, the traditional interface will be around for, a long time, obviously, because this technology is not going to replace it. And it will almost always be around. But if it becomes the primary mode, so be it. If they are able to make their money and build their company on an iPhone instead of a Mac, guess what? Fine, right? They did it. They're okay with that. And their primary business is now small pocket-sized computers rather than, big desktops or any of their other businesses. And they're fine with that. And I think that ability to kind of go, this is what is going to be, and this is what is going to work, and we don't care what it does to our past business or the ties that we had to it or the complaints that we're going to get. It's just, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's a strength. Now, obviously, they've made the right guesses so far, or the right predictions so far. So we'll have to see if they keep making those. But, I think that it's definitely a matter of, if they think that it's going to replace the standard interface, they're fine with it. And too bad. That's just the way it is.
They're not nostalgic. It's the next floppy drive.
Right.
But Liana, they didn't only give the iPhone a great new voice and great new ears. They gave it a fabulous new eye. So my question to you is, iPhone 4S, a great smartphone camera or the greatest smartphone camera?
Well, I think it's the greatest smartphone camera. I haven't really used the cameras on other smartphones, but I must say it is incredible. And I was more excited about this than any other feature, even Siri, and it's definitely my favorite feature on the iPhone 4S.
So what's the big deal? I mean, it's just a little tiny point and shoot. It's like a pinhole camera, right?
Oh, Renee. No, it's awesome. It's you can put all your point and shoots away. I mean, if you have an iPhone 4S, you don't need another camera as far as your everyday carry around camera. Which is great news, especially for guys who don't carry around a purse. You don't have to have.
It's
you don't
European.
Have to have
Speak for yourself.
So, it's a fantastic camera. It does a great job on landscapes. I was really impressed with the type of landscapes I was able to get with it. And low light, I'm getting pictures of my daughter I could not have gotten with the iPhone 4 just because my house has absolutely terrible lighting, and everything would be dark or just a big, huge blur. And it's picking up, doing a much better job in lower light. And I was disappointed. I am disappointed with the macro, though. The macro is awesome when it focuses.
Yeah.
When it makes that focus, it is awesome. It's crisp, it's clear, but I am struggling to focus on things that I didn't think I was going to struggle with. I mean, the really tiny things that blend in with the background, it makes sense to have issues focusing. I mean, even your DSLRs will do that. You have to manually focus. But, I mean, I was trying to focus on a little flower bud against dirt, and it was a purple flower, and the camera would not lock the focus. It just wouldn't do it. So that's the biggest, or actually the only real disappointment that I have with the camera.
Is that one of those things, Seth, where Apple deserves the rap for not surfacing manual controls? I mean, a lot of the HTC has a lot of manual controls for their Android cameras. Apple really wants you to tap, and it'll handle white balance, and it'll handle focus. And even if you want to lock it, you still are locking it to whatever they decide. Is that something you think they'll need to address?
Well, they may at some point, because we've seen them get more granular with everything in the subsequent OS updates. I mean, just look at the amount of settings you have now versus the first iPhone. Just in terms of just under general in settings, there's like 5 million more things that you can tweak and play with.
It's half our walkthrough, Seth.
I know it's substantial. So I think that just to look at it at a very high level, it's obvious that they want the experience to be easy and frictionless for 92% of their users. And that basically amounts to, we're not going to surface those controls because most of the time you won't need them. If you're taking a good shot, it'll probably be okay. If you have enough light, it'll probably be okay. And obviously this camera, all the stuff they talked about was, hey, it's better in low light, it's, better optics, all this stuff. It's going to be a better experience. I think one of two things will happen. Either they will be able to advance the camera sufficiently in the coming year or years to the point where those features are no longer necessary for basic point and shoot purposes, or like the settings, they'll expose some more of that stuff and it'll just be a couple of taps for people like us who maybe want to play with it and tweak it a little bit, but most people can get by without it. Just like most people will buy their iPhone at the Apple Store at their carrier, have it set up for them, and walk out and probably never think about those settings again.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Leanna.
I was just going to say, I don't really see Apple opening up full control like we would like on at least their base camera, because, like Seth said, people just want to pick it up and use it, and they don't want to see a bunch of controls and get confused. But it would be kind of nice to see Apple maybe open up the APIs of the camera a little bit. So third-party developers, you could get, like a pro camera app where it gave you some more control over what was happening, and maybe be able to choose your aperture and your shutter speed. That would be really cool to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a just speaking as a pro photographer for a previous life, I appreciate the hands-off aspects of the iPhone's camera. I mean, I think that speed is of the essence, with a smartphone. I obviously would like manual controls. I mean, I think that there's no reason not to offer them under a submenu. Tuck it up under where you put the grid and crap. I mean, nobody's going to see that if they don't look for it. But it's definitely a really good basic fixed lens camera. The zoom is the biggest thing. They need to figure out how to smash a zoom in there, even if it's just a small 2 or 3x. I mean, that's the biggest biggest downside of the iPhone as a camera. And I've used it extensively as a camera since it came out, even when it was taking really crap pictures, with the 2G and 3G. And back then, I carried a small compact, with me if I needed a point and shoot. And when I was shooting heavily, I shoot with my SLRs, of course, for weddings and all that jazz. But when I'm going traveling, most of the time, I wouldn't take an SLR unless I knew I was going on a photo expedition, So a small compact Canon or an Nikon, point and shoot is going to come with me. But the iPhone took the place of that when the iPhone 4 came around. Really, the iPhone 4 is the big switch. Yeah. When the camera got good enough to where you're like, hey, this is it. This is my camera, my pocket camera. But I think that there's still a big barrier between that and something like an S90, which has like a little 24 to 105 or 24 to 115 zoom, optical zoom, because people use zoom. I mean, I sold cameras for a while, and I can tell you, number 2 question right behind, how many megapixels is what's the zoom? So people are conscious of zoom and they want it. Which is, why they have a digital zoom built into the iPhone. But it's terrible. It's crap. You might as well just shoot it regularly and then crop it later. But
and sneaker zoom is the new stylus.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, I honestly, I definitely think that they can leverage technology that already exists and create something new out of it. Because 2 companies, primarily, Minolta, which no longer exists, they bought... who did they buy? Konica, and then they went under. But Motorola and then Sony also had one. They made super slim models that have an optical lens assembly that travels vertically in the body. So the lens zooms up and down inside the chassis of the body, and there's a prism, a small mirror, optical mirror, which directs it outwards through the lens. So if Apple was to just flip it and zoom the lens up and down in the chassis and then just bend it out and poke it out through the side of that, I think they could really come up with something very cool. And I know that they have filed patents about using optical oil as a zoom. So that's another possibility. So they're thinking about it. They wouldn't be filing patents on it if they weren't at least trundling along. Some guy's in the back corner of a lab and he's playing with oil, and they're like, yeah, let us know when you get that working, buddy, right? But it's
well, because they were all in on the camera this last time. They really want a good camera on this phone.
Yeah.
And that's a good point because, Seth, when we were at Singleton, you had Justin with you, and he is a bit of a foodie. And we were taking some pictures because we got the Kate and Will Royal Feast at Singleton. They went all out on the food. We took some pictures of it, and I handed them to Justin, and he just started instead of looking at the food, he's like, "Oh my goodness, look at this picture!" The camera was good enough to overwhelm his Food Network tendencies.
Yeah, he was completely blown away with it, and it's true. I mean that thing takes amazing pictures. And we weren't even in really bright light. I mean, obviously we're in a dining room and there's like hi-hats in the ceiling, so it's not great lighting, but there's some light. And we were just sitting at the table and just snapping them off. And every time you pass that phone around, I mean, zooming in, everything just looked so crisp and so clear. It's astonishing that
you could almost count the molecules.
Yeah, what they've been able to achieve with that same body and that same structure. So, I mean, If they could nail zoom, that would be huge.
So, Leanna, just to set things in perspective, it's not going to replace your DSLR, but for an average user, like if my sister had this, I don't think she would need a flip, and we didn't talk about video yet, but I don't think she'd need a flip, and I don't think she'd need a point and shoot anymore.
No, I agree with you. I definitely don't need a flip, because flip, all it has is digital zoom anyway, and sorry, I totally blanked out.
How was the video in your test?
A compact camera. The only thing hindering, the difference, it would be the optical zoom. So I would say most people can do perfectly fine with the iPhone 4S. And as far as the video was awesome. Yeah, it does a great job of 1080p, and the video stabilization is actually pretty decent when you're not talking about, running down the street, stuff like that. But panning as my daughter is running by and stuff like that, or even walking backwards with her running towards me, I was impressed with how well it did.
You can't downsize from 1080p, Matt. You only get 1080p. There's no 720p option. Is that a big deal?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely something to think about. I think that it will, if any thought is put into it ahead of time by the consumer, it will drive the sales of 32 and 64 gigabyte models, because you're looking at about 178 megabytes per minute when you're shooting 1080p. So, you're talking about 30 minutes worth on a 16 gig, and the 16 gig is full. And there's nothing else to do there, really. I mean, it's full, and you can't take pictures, and you can't install apps. Like, that's full. So it's definitely something to drive larger, capacities. And we talk about, like, did Apple do this on purpose? Yeah, probably. In my opinion, probably. Like, that's definitely something I could see them doing, and I don't really fault them for it, because it makes the camera simpler, right? It just turn it on and shoot. There's no pull-out panel with 1,700 options like the Droid Bionic, which still takes crap pictures and terrible video. But it just is what it is. You turn it on, you take great video. That's it. So I think that a 720 toggle would be cool, but I don't ever expect to see it.
Justin Horn in our chat room did the math. We linked to his article from When Will Apple right before it came out, and I was going to get 32, and when I saw the amount of data he calculated, I went to 64.
It's staggering.
Yeah. All right. So the last of the really big hardware features that we haven't spoken about yet is kind of the big hardware feature from iPhone 3GS. It's twice as fast, also from the iPad 2. It's twice as fast when it comes to the CPU. It's a dual-core Cortex A9, and it is 7 times faster on the graphics speed. It's, as far as we know, an Imagination Power VR SGX. This is a fast chipset.
Yeah, it's a screamer for sure.
It is blow away.
Yeah.
I just did some benchmarking on it today. It's fast.
Is that a consumer facing thing though? Because like Apple doesn't usually talk specs, but when it comes to the intermediary devices, the 3GS, the iPad 2, and now the iPhone 4S, they talk enough specs to make you think that the chip makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's. Oh yeah, I'll pick up this one.
Okay.
Just briefly, I think that it's definitely, people were criticizing the presentation because they felt that emphasizing the processor was like a no-no, because Apple never talks about specs. But the truth is, Apple does talk about specs sometimes, right? They don't always talk about specs, and they don't emphasize them as the core aesthetic or the core point rather in the presentation. But they do talk about specs, and the A5, remember, is an Apple product itself.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing that people don't understand. When Apple talks about the A5, they might as well be talking about another iPhone or another iPad. This is a product they make, and that they sell millions of units of. So this is not they're not talking about, and we talked to AMD, and AMD built us this great, thing, because that is their product, that is their baby. So of course they're going to talk about those specs and how they compare to other phones, because it's definitely worth talking about. I mean, obviously the iPhone 4, there was a lot of talk about the A4 in the iPhone 4 presentation. There were the slides with the die, and there were the slides with the performance. because people have to know that this is an Apple product and that Apple is, making advancements in that product. So I don't think that it's a big deal that they were talking about those specs.
And then right away, Seth, they show that Infinity Blade demo just to drive home what it means to you.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. They talk about specs in a way that the other phone manufacturers don't. They talk about specs in as much as it serves a purpose to show what experience the upgrade from the last hardware brings. Like they'll say, this doesn't have an A4, this has an A5. Here's all the stuff you can do with the A5. Look at how much better this looks. And they're very mindful not to say, look how crappy it looks on the old model, because they realize that they're still going to, those phones are still in the channel. So they're still clearing those things out and they're selling a ton of those. And I'm sure they're going to sell a ton of iPhone 4s, even in spite of the 4S. But the way that they talk about specs is not, it's this many gigahertz, it's this much RAM, it's this clock speed. Those things are not important. They have a certain threshold that they will speak to in terms of pure hardware upgrades, just so that it's quantifiable. Like, yes, it's not exactly the same thing. I mean, if they didn't talk about specs and they just showed you the 4S and went, here it is, and here's all the stuff you can do with it, everybody would be like, wait a minute, is this just the same phone? Like, they have to say something because it needs to be said. But that's not the focal point. The focal point for them is always the experience. Yes, these are the new chips. Yes, these things are faster. There's a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that, but all of that stuff just means this. And what this is it's the delivery of all the experiential stuff that they want you to enjoy.
And Leanna, you made the point that for a lot of people, they won't even notice. It's just their apps will open and close faster. And you were talking about just how much better using iMovie was on a 4S.
Yes. I definitely immediately noticed just the phone was snappier. As I navigated up through my pages and opened apps and did this and did that, everything just responded faster. There was much less delay. And then I did my video review and I edited the whole thing on iMovie, and it was such a much better experience than on the iPhone 4. I've always complained that the iPhone 4, iMovie ran laggy and it was, it would skip and, it was just jumpy and annoying to use. But on the iPhone 4S, there is just no hiccups. It's perfectly smooth and just works so nicely.
It's even got a digital signal processor in, they said, Matt, right? To give it that extra little boost.
ISP is what they called it, but I think in the end it's what they're referring to is an image processor that works on color correcting images and compacting JPEGs and things like that, which most digital cameras have. But the fact that they mentioned it at all means that they probably built it from scratch, which is great. And that means that they're very, very invested in camera quality, because any camera company that is worth its salt is going to either tailor make their own image processors or they're going to contract one specifically built for them. Nikon, for instance, contracts Panasonic to make theirs, and they're made for Nikon cameras bespoke. Canon actually goes one step further and makes their own image processors. So they have a plant where they make their own image processors, and then they have a plant where they make their own CCDs or CMOS chips mostly now, because they make CMOS chips for their compacts too. And then they have a plant where they make optical lenses or optical components. So basically, Canon end-to-end controls the image path. It goes into the lens, it gets captured by the image capture chip, whether it be CMOS or CCD, and then it gets processed by their own image processor. So the image that you end up with, they've controlled that image path end to end. And I think that's what Apple was interested in. Most likely, they always had some sort of image processor. Well, they had to have some sort of image processor in there, because it can be done by the CPU, but generally you want to have a dedicated one. So they probably always had one, but it was probably somebody else's, or they had contracted somebody to build it. And I think they probably mentioned it because they redesigned it for themselves or took more control of it.
That's something you see also in high-end televisions, right? Because everyone makes their own panel, but then Sony will talk about how they process, like their Bravia engine for doing all this.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you want to control image quality end to end, you're going to need to build the ancillary components. You're going to need to laterally expand to make sure that you cover that end to end. Because if you make a fantastic panel and then somebody else makes a crap, processing engine, your panel's going to look terrible. When in fact, it's maybe one of the best on the planet. It just doesn't look like that.
Yep.
Curiously, Seth, still 512 megabytes of RAM. I mean, if people didn't tear apart the phone and tell us this, would we notice? Is this a problem? Should we have gone to 1 gig?
I don't think anybody would argue that having more RAM is a bad thing, but I think with a device like this, being that it's about the use cases and what people are actually going to do with it, I think it's one of those specs that we would probably like to see bumped up, just because in our mind we know what more RAM gives us. But as long as what the phone delivers matches what our expectations are, I don't think it's really an issue.
Anyone disagree?
Not really. I mean, the only thing that I could ever see, having a practical kind of benefit there is that more of my dinging tabs would stay open in Safari, which, every fifth one seems to reload. Yeah. But there are certain things like little gaps through which you can see the effects of having less RAM. But in the end, no, the whole experience feels pretty good, and that's largely because Apple built it ground up to use as little RAM as possible. So
I think that's what we heard a long time ago, right, Leon? Like, you saw the huge difference from the 3G to the 3GS, and since then it kind of feels like they've let the RAM get to a certain level and they're not so worried about it anymore.
Right. I mean, I think they, tested the iPhone 4S on, the 512 megabytes of RAM and was like, hey, it's running great. Why they didn't really feel like it was a need to, make the experience what they wanted it to be. 512 was getting it done. And, I sort of agree with them. I mean, I obviously would like to see more, because I do kind of have this, how is it going to be running, a year from now? Because it always seems the devices are getting slower as, the year goes by with different apps and such. But as of right now, it's running great to me, and I don't really see a hindrance without having a gig of RAM.
And boy, that camera shutter is so much faster. Thank goodness.
Yes, yes, it is.
I didn't even set a timer for my coffee. I would just start the camera, and then by the time it opened, I'd have the coffee ready. There's been a couple gotchas. One of the jokes going around the symposium, Seth, was this thing called, and I hesitate to use the term, a junk attack, because now that the camera can bypass the... Oh, so go ahead, tell us about this.
A very exciting prospect for friends who want to play jokes on one another. The junk shot. So basically, like with PhotoStream, the way it is now, you grab your friend's phone and you can double tap the button and it takes you right to the camera shortcut. And so you don't have to get into the phone. You take the camera, and what you do is you take a picture of, your boy parts.
Or any prank you'd like.
Or sure. Okay, but specifically for the story, it had to do with boy parts. So you take that picture, and then that's on your friend's phone, and it's also on your friend's iPad and your friend's Apple TV and your friend's laptop. So basically, the quintessential junk shot is the junk shot that goes out into the universe and embarrasses your friend on a litany of levels.
Yeah, it's like Apple doesn't always think through every possible demented consequence of the features that they think will make our lives better.
I'm actually glad this happened, because I really hope that Apple lets us delete photos from the photo stream. It's absolutely ridiculous that we can't. If somebody has access to the photo stream, I should be then allowing them that trust of deleting photos from it as well. And hopefully this will help Apple make the decision to let us delete from the photo stream.
Do you guys think it's going to be like a copy paste thing though? Like, oh yeah, we just needed to figure out how we wanted you to delete it. Like, this has to be something they've considered. I think this first approach all hinges on the way they've positioned iCloud in general, in that iCloud is not the canonical place for your data. Your data lives on all your devices, and iCloud is the thing that kind of like, it's like the thing that changes the train tracks, like it just kind of moves things where they need to go and makes sure everything is in its place. So if I guess I'm thinking the reason they haven't implemented some kind of delete is because they're not really sure where to put that point of control. And in my mind, I would think, well, the point of control then by default should exist in all the places. If you don't want to make one place the place, then whether you delete it from your phone or from iPhoto, or if you log in and they give you a way to delete it from the web tools, wherever you want to have the control, you should be able to have it, and it should come out of all the places just as easily as it went in. So I think that the reason we don't have it yet is because they're probably still deciding how they want to actually put, where they want to put it.
Scott wants it on the left. Eddie wants it on the right. There's no arbitration going on. It's just... All right, so let's finish off with a tour around the room to see, Leanna, should people get an iPhone 4S? Who would you recommend get it, and who would you recommend not get it at this point? Did I lose Leanna?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I'm back.
Awesome.
I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's using a feature phone and considering a smartphone. And anyone who is using an iPhone 3GS or later model, definitely recommend to get the iPhone 4S. And then for those on the iPhone 4, if you're eligible for an upgrade, I would say definitely get it. And also, if you're the type who likes to have the new stuff, or even is just slightly considering it. If you're thinking, should I get it? Yes. The answer is yes. If you're thinking about it. If you're not thinking about it, then you probably don't really care much, and the iPhone 4 will do you just fine. But I do think that you should wait for your upgrades and not spend, several $100s more just so you can get it 3 months earlier.
Unless you're a dumb blogger, right?
Well, yes, of course.
Seth?
I would pretty much agree with Leanna in most cases. I think that if you're on a 3GS or anything before that, it's a great upgrade. My wife actually has my old 3GS and it's failing, and she is just so excited to get this phone, and I can't wait to actually hear her squealing with joy as to how good it is compared to what she's used to. Because the 3GS is still a solid phone, but her particular unit is not really.
You used to look at me like that, honey. Now it's just all the phone gets the affection.
I know. It'll be an inflection point in our marriage, to be sure, but we'll work it out. But I think, like Leanna said, if you're eligible for an upgrade and you want to have new stuff, make the jump. Maybe you can sell your old phone, maybe hand it down to somebody in your family. But it's definitely an interesting time to get a new phone, because it's not just, it's faster, there's this, there's that. I think the addition of Siri, even though it seems gimmicky, like I think at this point we can all agree that FaceTime, when you're using it, is great, but for the most part, you don't really think about it. Whereas this, I think, has the potential to really capture people's imagination more than anything else, because of the emotional conversational component that we spoke about before. It really has a growth potential that FaceTime didn't. I mean, FaceTime is video calling. Video calling has existed forever. Apple just made it a little bit easier. But I think that if you want to kind of get in on the ground floor, so to speak, of what may be a really, really new and interesting user interface for devices of this kind, and devices in general, I mean, I really hope Apple rolls this out to Mac OS 10, because I would love, love, love to have this on my MacBook Pro. I think it's a cool purchase. I think if you can swing it, definitely go for it. What
if you're an Android or BlackBerry or Palm Pre Minus user?
Oh God, are you specifically making a joke about Dave now?
I'm including him in a greater joke.
All right. I think if you have those phones and you're looking to change, I think now would be a good time to change, especially if you're a Palm Pre Minus user. I'm sorry, Dave. He's getting his 4S tomorrow. It's okay. If you're a BlackBerry user and you can't get rid of a keyboard, then you might not want to do that. But I thought that too. Like, I was a BlackBerry user. I had a Trio before that. I thought, I will never not have a phone with keys. That's just crazy talk. And you kind of get used to it, and you get used to it quicker than you would think. And the upside to it is that you give up the keys and that kind of comfort, but then what you get in terms of applications and user experience is so much more profound that if you're looking to try something new, take a leap of faith and try it. You can probably get the 30-day return in most places. You might as well give it a swing.
Matthew?
It's definitely a definite upgrade if you're already an iOS user and you're on a 3GS or earlier. I agree with Leanna in that there's no reason not to upgrade, especially because the resale values for older iPhones are really good. And 3GS you can easily get 150 to 180 bucks for. So 30 bucks for an upgrade to a new phone, no big deal. And if you have a 3GS, the contract's not a problem because you're already at a contract, or most likely, unless you bought it, really relatively recently. So I'd say it's a no-brainer for that. Obviously, Android users, it's going to be a matter of whether or not you want to extricate yourself from Google's syncing services to move over to iOS. Although there are integrations, or there are ways to export it fairly easily. So, it's better. I'd put some benchmarks up on the site today. It's a faster phone in almost every way than any other Android phone, including the flagship stuff like the Galaxy S2 and the Bionic. So if you're looking for just the best phone, it's an easy argument to make that it is the best phone. If you're sold on Android, then it's definitely going to be, harder for you to justify it. But in the end, the real question, the only real hardcore question is, I'm an iPhone 4 user. Should I upgrade? Right? That's the real core of it because everybody else really kind of should. But if you're an iPhone 4 user, the answer is don't buy it out early out of your contract. But once it's up, it's a fantastic upgrade. So if you can upgrade within the next 3 to 4 months, do it. If you can't, then keep your iPhone 4 until the 5 comes out.
Yeah, I think you guys have said everything that I would say. Exactly. The early iPhone users, it's a great upgrade. If you're on an iPhone 4, unless you have a significant amount of money and one of the new features is so compelling that it makes it worth that money, or one of the old features is so annoying, like if an iPhone 4 is unbelievably slow to you for some reason, or you just have to have that camera, or you want to be one of the first people in your block to have Siri and you have a lot of cash, you can justify it. The other phones, it's an interesting question. We're on the crux of QNX phones coming out of Research in Motion. They might launch a Nexus Galaxy Prime, at least 2 of those 3 words, so it will probably come true very soon. So it is an incredibly exciting time to be a smartphone user. And if you have any doubt, you can wait a little bit. Apple's not going to stop making them. But if you want to be on iOS, this is a hell of a time to get in on it. I think this is a great phone for Apple. A lot of people are disappointed that it wasn't that wedge that they got to see on the case makers pages and all the blogs. But I think in hindsight, it was a very predictable phone, but it's still an incredibly exciting phone. Any final thoughts, comments? Leanna's beanie?
Nice hat, Leanna.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lila, for the cameo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's getting a little antsy, so I put her on mute and let her come up.
Well, Leanna, where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on Twitter as @LLofty. You can, of course, find me on the blog, tippy.com. And let's see here. You can subscribe to my Facebook, facebook.com/LLofty. Please don't ask to be my friend. I won't accept you. And you can also find me on my personal blog, llofty.com, but it's actually currently infected with malware, so if you're on a PC, stay away.
She doesn't want you Windows users.
I'm not fixing it. Just stay away, Windows users.
Oh, I just found out about it a couple hours ago, so I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully it'll be fixed soon.
Nice. Seth Clifford, sir, where can we find out more about you?
I'm at Seth Clifford on Twitter. You can find me on the Tippy shows. You can find me on Iterate with Renee and Mark Edwards of Bajango. And if you want to check out our apps and some of the sites and stuff we do, our website is nfidm.com. We're Nickelfish, damn it.
Nice. And Matt, where can we find out more about you?
You can find, I'm on Twitter at mpanzarino. That's MPANZARINO. And at The Next Web, where you can find me writing about Apple and other gadgets.
Nice. And I would like to say that some of the exchanges that you have, sometimes including Seth Clifford, are some of my favorite and most hilarious tweets of the day. So thank you guys for those.
I do my best to waste others' time.
Sometimes the geek references make my head explode. They're like the best things on the Twitter. You can find me at Renee Ritchie. You can find all of us at Tippy. We are here each and every, usually Wednesday nights, but we stole Georgia's Sunday night slot where you typically find iPad Live. It is at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. British Summer Time. You can find it at www.tippy.com/live. And if you want the show notes, head on down to tippy.com/podcast. You can write us at podcast@tippy.com. leave a comment on the blog when the show goes live. And if you haven't already, please head on over to iTunes and subscribe and leave a rating. It helps iTunes feature us, and that gives us more of you wonderful people to talk to. For all of our shows, including Iterate, Zen and Tech, Mobile Nations, Super Functional, Crackberry.com, Android Central, and all the rest, check out mobilenations.com/shows. We will see you next week, everybody. Have a great weekend.
See you guys.
Night.